Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it is another video in my 2023 NFL offseason prediction series, and it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Make sure to leave a thumbs up on this video. It really helps me out, pushes out to more viewers, and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get those subscriber numbers to continue to rise, and leave a comment in the comment section of what you think of the Jacksonville Jaguars, their season this year, and what they're potentially going to do in the offseason. They were truly the most surprising team in the league. They were certainly up there. I think them and Seattle were really the two teams that surprised everyone the most. I don't think too many people expected the Jags to win the division yet, let alone make the playoffs and win a playoff game on top of that. They really turned it around. They were sort of up and down. They had good little streaks, and I think that that's just a product of having a really young quarterback with a brand new head coach, learning a new system, and sort of trying to incorporate all the strengths and the weaknesses of all the other players on the team into making the most conducive formula for success. And Trevor Lawrence, going into next year, I think people got to start looking at him potentially as a top 10 quarterback. You know, they do have places where they need to add, particularly in their weaponry. I think getting a true number one receiver is in the cards for them, even though they pay Christian Kirk like one. I think that they probably need to look into getting more weapons. Maybe you supplement that with a more traditional three-down tight end outside of Evan Ingram, who did have a pretty good year, but Giants fan here. Their defense certainly could see some improvement as well. Trayvon Walker was drafted specifically for long-term growth and long-term success, and his ceiling more so than what he was going to deliver on his first year. We saw some good breakout moments from Tyson Campbell. They showed a lot of potential on the defense. It's just a matter of, again, consistency. And their organization seems to be really committed to giving them that consistency that they need, and it really does start at the head coaching position with this team. So the head coach is Doug Peterson, the Mr. Big Nuts himself from that Super Bowl win with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he came in and he immediately turned this around. It does seem like he was the missing piece of the puzzle for this team, for Trevor Lawrence, for the overall development of this team. They did trade away James Robinson in the middle of the season because they had settled in with Travis Etienne so well. And he found a way to make that receiving group work. He did that very well in Philadelphia, to be honest. They didn't really have a true number one receiver, at least not that I can think of offhand. I mean, they had Nelson Aguilar, I think. They had their tight ends were okay. They had Zach Ertz and Trey Burton. I think they really focused on that by getting Evan Ingram and then getting a compliment for him with guys like Dan Arnold and who was the rookie that they got? My apologies. But you can see the offensive rankings here. And really, outside of the red zone and the turnovers, this is what you wanted to see. They're top 15, top 14, top 10 in some of these major categories. 9th in yards, 10th in total touchdowns, 5th in sacks, 9th in third down percentage. What you really just have to clean up is that red zone percentage and then the turnovers. But that's going to come with time when you do have a young quarterback and you do have a new system. Those turnovers are going to come down. We saw it particularly in the playoff game against the Chargers with Trevor Lawrence. He came out, had a stinker of a first half, threw 4 interceptions, came out in the second half and dominated. So you want to figure out a way to harness what he did in the second half and not so much what he did in the first half and do something of that more consistently throughout the season. But that just comes with time with quarterbacks. Going into next year, second year in that system, I expect the turnovers, them to drop down into maybe the top 13, top 12, and improve the red zone percentage into the top 15, hopefully into the top 10. But again, this all comes with time, and the Jaguars are committed to Trevor Lawrence. They do have a very, very good offensive system in place. Where they do have to see some improvement is on the defensive side of the ball. As you can see here, they did very well with forcing turnovers. They did quite well with the total touchdowns and with the points, but they did struggle in the red zone. They struggled on third down. They struggled with sacks. Like we said at the top with Trayvon Walker, you hope that he comes along here in year 2 and does improve quite a bit. You maybe want to get some more of an interior pass rush as well. And you want to clean up that third down. But the third down, the sacks sort of go hand in hand there. The red zone percentage, you need to be able to stop them from getting to the end zone. You need to play on that short field. And I think that's going to come with getting more cornerback depth and a better pass rush. I'll give your cornerbacks a chance in the red zone. If you're not getting a pass rush, then when you get to the red zone, it sort of just allows receivers to run around until they get open. You don't want to give the quarterback a lot of time. You want to allow your defensive backs to play tight coverage and do it for short amounts of time and get a pass rush in there and force a team to kick a field goal rather than just allow the quarterback all that time to throw the ball. And you can see that the passing yards, 28th in passing yards. That is the number that really needs to come down. I think that you can manipulate the draft a bit. The draft is sort of set up, I think, for Jacksonville to really improve in that aspect. Now, a big issue they have is they're starting almost $14 million over the salary cap. And that comes with, the big money to Christian Kirk, some of the other big money deals that they signed over the last 2 years since the Khans really took over. And one of the advantages they have is there's not a lot of guys that need to be re-signed. So they can clear up a lot of cap space by making a couple of cuts. You see Tyler Shatley there. He's sort of, he's a backup center. You can replace him with a rookie and I think look okay. You can even maybe bring him back in that second, third wave of free agency later on a much cheaper deal. Roy Robertson-Harris, you want to replace him as well. A $7.8 million cap savings is really ideal. You can replace him in the draft. And Shaq Griffin, $13.1 million in cap savings, that move has to get made. There's not a lot of dead money that comes with it. That move has to get made. And then you just restructure Christian Kirk. You get $10.9 million in cap savings doing that. And the only guy you really need to bring back is your kicker, Riley Patterson, who's a exclusive restricted free agent. So it's an $870,000 cap hit. So every move you can make in-house that's significant is going to be freeing up a lot of cap room for you to potentially make a little bit of a move come free agency if the opportunity opens itself to do so. So for those of you that have watched previous videos, you know that I am a cap genius when it comes to this, using OverTheCap.com, of course, as reference, that I find a way to free up cap room in the best ways possible, make me a GM in the NFL, and I went from minus 14 to 20.3 million without losing really anyone of any type of significance. So this is what they're going to be able to spend, and we look at their team needs. They do need an alpha 1 wide receiver. They do need I believe a 3-down tight end, a more traditional tight end, which I think there's a good number of those in the draft upcoming, which is why letting Evan Ingram go, I think, is in their best interest rather than having to pay him $8-9 million to stick around, because you did pay him a certain amount. I believe it was $7.5 million for the 1 year, and he did play quite well. So he's going to be wanting at least that, if not a little bit more from you. So maybe you let that one out the door. Then there's the interior offensive line. You want to get maybe a guard onto the roster. You got the interior defensive line. You want to get some internal pass rush. You have Devon Hamilton, who I think is quite good. Trayvon Walker can sort of float in and out from being a 5 technique to being more of a traditional outside linebacker. There's a lot of maneuvers you can make there, but you want to get somebody who is a strong interior pass rusher. And you never know who might be dropping in the draft to open up that opportunity. I think if Brian Breezy, he's a real candidate to drop, so you can maybe figure out a way to get him. And then you want to look at your defensive backs. You want to continue to grow that because you do have a front 7 that's young, that's coming along, that may be based more on upside, specifically Trayvon Walker, depending on who else you add into that front 7. It could be a lot of upside guys. So you want to have a stronger defensive back group, and then once those guys come along, that's going to take your defense to an even another level that they just aren't at right now. But I was looking at the free agency market, and I was like, who would be somebody that would come over to Jacksonville that could sort of fill in a role. And I saw Nelson Aguilar, who has got ties to Doug Peterson, could come in and be an immediate receiver. You can sign him to a short-term deal. And then I like Greg Gaines coming over from the Rams as an interior defensive lineman, sort of a 3-tech, 5 technique sometimes player at a cheap rate. Enter into a rotation. You can play him situationally, and he's got a lot of experience. He's played next to Aaron Donald, I think his entire career as a starter in the NFL at least. So he's bringing in a lot of knowledge at least as to how he saw how great players really did it, and I think he can bring that at least as a mind, as a teacher in that film room, and then a little bit contributing onto the field as well. So with that, $15 million in cap space for the draft and for that second and third wave of free agency, where I think that once they finish the draft, they're going to have a really good idea of the exact places they need to target. So I think that having this little bit of extra money to get those more veteran type of players is going to play greatly into their advantage. And I think that more veteran players, kind of like what we're seeing in Detroit, might be more inclined to want to come and play for this team, seeing them on such a rapid ascension. But let's talk about their draft strategy next. And this is the day 1 and day 2 draft strategy for me. Really the first 2 rounds of the draft. In the first round, Michael Mayer, O'Cyrus Torrence. Very, very likely, very possible, I wouldn't say very likely, but very possible, one of those 2 guys will be available for them at their spot in the first round. Now, if both are available, I would take Michael Mayer and then worry about getting an interior offensive lineman later, because there is that good second wave you can get in the second round with a Weipler or a Voorhees, even a Van Pran, Steve Avila. There's a lot of options there. But if Michael Mayer's not on the board, you're not all that upset if you end up with getting O'Cyrus Torrence, who immediately comes in as a starting guard for you. And then the second round, you just turn your attention to that second group of tight ends, Darnell Washington, Dalton Kincaid, and Luke Musgrave. You got to assume one of those guys is going to go. It's very rare you see a run on tight ends in a draft unless it's really in that first round area, like we saw with O.J. Howard, Evan Ingram, and David Njoku. And I think people sort of fell out of love with that idea. We see less and less tight ends getting taken super high, especially because those guys are drafted a lot based upon traits. But if they have an opportunity to get Darnell Washington and they haven't already taken Michael Mayer, that could be really the best case scenario. O'Cyrus Torrence, Darnell Washington. That would be a tremendous group, because Darnell Washington could pretty much double as an extra offensive lineman on those rushing downs. And then who is going to be able to get any type of leverage or advantage with him in the passing game just based upon all of his physical traits? So I think that would be the best outcome for Jacksonville. And then once you get into rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, that's when you start to just go, I would say, focus on that best player available philosophy, and you could really fill out the roster quite well, because a lot of the players that are really good in this draft are playing positions where they could make a tremendous early impact for you in the positive. And there it is, my Jacksonville Jaguars prediction video for the 2023 NFL offseason. Make sure to thumbs up if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment in the comment section about what you think of what I did with Jacksonville and if you would do anything all that different. And I will see you guys with the next video in this series, and you can check the ones that have already been done right there on the other side of my head. But until next time,